We have a joke at OPM that we're the people that help the people that help the people, because we bring the HR policy guidance, oversight, and services to the agencies that in turn are the ones that have that direct line to the American public. What we will see is better hiring, individuals who are more equipped to come in and take on the roles. And I think that increases the service delivery to the American public. Training and equipping the workforce is critically important to having a high-performing workforce. And so I believe that through being able to level set and raise learning management, that they're going to see a better quality of workforce for the federal government that's going to be delivering those services.
Welcome to Management Matters. I'm James Christian Blockwood. Today, we're talking about a critical issue that sits at the intersection of workforce management, technology, and trust, the modernization of federal HR and retirement systems. In 2021, an Academy panel issued a report recommending that the Office of Personnel Management seek funding from Congress to modernize its IT systems. That included developing a secure employee digital record, upgrading systems that support federal retirement programs, modernizing OPM's data and analytics platform, and making the agency's website more user-friendly. These recommendations weren't just about technology. They were about improving the experience of federal employees and retirees, strengthening data-driven decision-making, and ensuring systems are fit for the future. To help us unpack what this modernization effort means in practice and what's at stake, we're joined by two guests with deep insight into federal HR and workforce policy. Rebecca Ayers serves as Deputy Associate Director for HR Strategy and Evaluation Solutions at the Office of Personnel Management, where she brings extensive experience working at the intersection of federal, human capital, policy, and organizational effectiveness. We're also joined by Academy Fellow Brodi Fontenot, a nationally recognized expert in federal human resources and workforce transformation. Brodi has advised agencies and leaders across government on modernizing HR practices, navigating change, and aligning systems with the needs of today's federal workforce. Together, we'll discuss why IT modernization at OPM matters, how these systems affect employees across the federal lifecycle, and what leaders should be paying attention to as these efforts move forward. Rebecca, let's start with you. Help us get up to speed. Tell us what the current administration is trying to achieve, the approach you all are taking, and the impact you're hoping to have.
Well, James Christian, thank you so much for having me on. And you start with a really big question. What is the administration trying to do? And I think we literally could spend this entire podcast talking about all the different initiatives. If I could consolidate it into just a couple of sentences or words of what the administration's goal is in federal HR, it's pretty straightforward. It is building a merit-based workforce and modernize how we manage people. And it's so that our federal employees can do their best work in service to the American public. And one of the things I really appreciate of what we're trying to do here at OPM is our approach pairs the policy leadership. So what are the things that need to happen, regulatory and policy related, with operational capacity? And so what we have termed our federal HR 2.0 initiative is OPM is looking to consolidate both core human capital systems, as you've mentioned. How can we gain efficiencies there? And also establishing an OPM Shared Service Center that's going to integrate this operational HR with strategic consulting and bring a different level of HR services to agencies. And I would say the impact that we are driving is really it's practical and measurable, right? So it's simply things like streamlining workflows, being consistent and compliant in our processes, and looking for where we can get government-wide savings, both in terms of money and time and personnel costs, while also balancing the fact that you've got centralization happening while continuing to give agencies that level of autonomy that they need in order to succeed in their missions. And I would say the impact is going to be around what you're going to see is workforce optimization and how we can handle high-volume, repeatable tasks. We're also going to align strategy to bring that workforce optimization. Everyone is hopefully familiar with the merit hiring plan, so we're looking at how we can introduce strategic merit-based hiring, both with OPM, but encourage that in agencies, and how we're building capacity in things like job analysis, assessments, how we're doing cross-gov announcements. And then ultimately, as you've already mentioned, more modernization. Can we get a system in the federal government where our employees feel like they're living in the 21st century when they interact with the HR tasks that they have to take every day?
So, Brodi, you just heard a fairly ambitious agenda, definitely some laudable goals to have. What do you think about the approach, and what are the types of impact that you think need to be happening right now in this space?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me today, and I really appreciate it. To be frank, a very ambitious task that would be an OPM are undertaking. And I'll say OMB because, right, this is all sort of kicked off with that memo that was, put out last December, followed up with the most recent memo specifically about the shared services. And to me, there really are a continuum. To me, human capital, and I'm going to use human capital, human resources interchangeably here, because to me, they really are the same, right? They're really talking about people. How do we hire people? How do we retain them? How do we make their experiences while they're employees good, to be frank, right? And then when they're exiting, how do we make that retirement, process, really optimal, right? Kind of the whole life cycle of coming in, working, and then, moving on. And I see the, really ambitious program that OPM is undertaking kind of along that continuum. And it's not in isolation. There are all kinds of shared services ideas that have been talked about for a long time, right? If you go way back in the old days in the 1990s, when it was first introduced at all, when we're trying to professionalize a lot of this through the CFO Act, and all through the years up till now, really thinking about how to operationalize and these repeatable tasks that Rebecca was talking about, things that really can be standard. And so, I see this in that long line of what we're doing. This is not isolated. This is not the first time anyone's ever undertaken this. And I was really pleased with the sort of pretty clear memos that have been put out, at least to get started. Now, obviously, there's some things OPM and the leadership should think about as they move forward. But to be frank, I think the reason we're even here is, there are a couple of, real issues that need to be talked about. The first is, what is a shared service, right? And I'll go back to my friends at GAO, not a competitor in Apple, but, definitely a compliment. They have just a really good definition that I like to use. And it's pretty simple. Shared services are the delivery of common services to federal agencies through consolidated, standardized capabilities offered through designated provider. Now, the hard part to me is the standardized capabilities. And I know Rebecca probably will have a lot more to say about this, and I know that they're kind of going through a little bit of that process, but really defining those, I think, is going to be the hardest part.
And Rebecca, how does OPM think about this shared services model?
So, Brodi, I really appreciated that you reached back to a little bit of the history, because I think when you take a look at the environment that we're in now, you've got to set it in this larger context. So complex systems like the federal government, you see a lot of ebb and flow from the centralization to decentralization. And Brodi, I know you already mentioned, the introduction of shared services. Well, you start with the Civil Service Reform Act. That was let's centralize back inside of the federal government how we manage human capital. And then we saw the advent of reinventing government, another time where there was a great deal of downsizing in government, where we began to see the decentralization and the delegated authority being sent out to the agencies, under the belief that by decentralizing a lot of this work, that agencies could be more targeted and specialized to fulfill their vast missions that they have in terms of hiring and managing their workforces. And, in the early 2000s, as you mentioned, we saw this introduction of shared services. And what we're seeing now is a little bit of that ebb and flow that I think is happening across the federal government. So we've now had several decades of decentralized HR, which what we found is what happens if anyone studies systems, is a lot of fragmentation. So things like duplicate systems, inconsistent policies, costly processes, uneven service quality, all these things that come, eventually as decentralized systems move down that path. And what we're seeing now is this centralization back to OPM as the standard bearer for what we need to be doing in management of the federal government, basically. And so shared services is tackling this by centralizing what we think are repeatable HR operations and coming on, pairing them with some of that advisory support. But what we want agencies to get consistency, scale, and speed without losing control. And so the introduction of things like a core HR IT platforms and the option to come to OPM for services is bringing back that centralization of service and IT and technology that we haven't seen for several decades. And what we're doing through our, these memos that you've seen on Federal HR 2.0 is, we're replacing over 100 different systems with a single HR core HCM system. And then we're standing up the shared service center to be able to provide that integrated service. So the goal is really that. I think we're in a bigger picture here of this return to centralizing and bringing the federal government and the agencies back to the goals that I said earlier about what this administration is driving for, which is building a merit-based workforce and modernizing how we manage people.
And Brody, you heard Rebecca outline a pretty good vision for shared services and offer a pretty compelling reason for needing to make some transformation there. But some of the challenges that come out of this, standardization, replacing systems, the need for modernization, those are things that have been around for a while we've needed to address. What are some of the other challenges around shared services?
Yeah, no, and this is really the sticky part, right? I mean, it's a change management effort. And the folks who maybe were listening to this will know those words and maybe shudder a little bit to a certain extent, so maybe excited. But again, when you have a true change management effort, it really is a lot of things rolled into one. You have to have a clear goal. That's what the memos, I think, are really trying to articulate. The harder parts, to be frank, though, are really the feedback loop, right? The feedback mechanism. As folks are getting absorbed into this, how are the customers' needs being discussed with those actually implementing it? I think that's the first. That's very difficult to do on a consistent basis. It can be done. It's obviously been done before, but I've seen that could be one place where it's tripped up. Not the first part, right? It's when the first issue happens. How do folks get feedback and move forward? The second is sort of long-term commitment. We talked about, we introduced this, that this has been a long-term effort. For these types of where you essentially are at making a change in management effort, a rebranding is necessary both inside your agency and outside. You need that long-term commitment to get the customers to continue to buy in for not only 6 months or a year, but really a long-term period. So this is part of your core operation. And finally, really differentiating what is standardized versus what needs to be flexible. I can go into that a little bit more, but this is so core to how you make this product so valuable to people that they can't go anywhere else. I mentioned IBC before, right? There was really a push-pull, I'll use my own example, about what was core. This is how we do business. And we can do these other things for you. And I know OPM in the memos, if folks get a chance to read them, they actually do articulate that.
And Rebecca, you're clearly committed to OPM's success around this, but what does the outcome look like for agencies? How should kind of federal agencies and employees feel about this? How should they experience this? And ultimately, what does success look like for them?
First, I want to clarify, Brody, because you mentioned, what do we get? What is actually happening here? And I think because we've got a couple of memos that have gone out amongst the many memos that have come out of OPM is what's mandatory versus what is voluntary. And I think that can help answer this question, what should agencies expect? So first, the mandatory is we are moving all agencies onto a core HCM platform. We believe in the buying power of the government. We believe in the need to, I think we're estimating almost $1 billion in savings by moving us all to one centralized core HCM platform. And that is going to get efficiencies not only in the buy and in the cost of what agencies are spending on IT, but also it's going to put all of our data under one house. It's going to have the line impact of retirements and how we can more quickly and easily process retirements for federal employees. Because right now, a lot of the time spent is going through the different systems. If you are an employee who's bounced around from different agencies, we have to go back and recreate your personnel record. And so we're looking to bring that data in-house. And so that is what is mandatory. And that is what we're so excited about. And we're excited about because I think we're also going to be able, with the buying power of the entire government, leapfrog the technology that agencies are using right now with our ability to buy and go out and get the best system for the federal government. So that's the mandatory. And that's what folks should expect. Agencies should expect to have better data, a better system to manage their HR actions, while the federal employee should expect to be able to do many things that they would have to go through a person or an HR office at their fingertips that they can take care of themselves, and that they get to interact with a better HRIT system. The flip side is the voluntary part is the OPM Shared Service Center. And so this is where we're offering to agencies to come alongside them and support them in shared services that are going to be, built up under the systems that we're bringing on board in our current USA suite of systems. But the goal here was with a lot of the realignment that was happening in government, agencies saw a decrease in their HR support. We've also seen changes within the shared service centers with the agencies like Treasury reconsidering whether or not they want to be in the business of doing external support. And so that created an immediate need for OPM at OMB's request to take on these agencies. What we are hoping and what we aim to provide these agencies who are coming on for shared services is that they're going to see a more strategic and consultative approach to managing their HR operations. We have provided services in OPM for many, many years, and we've done it on a customized consulting basis. And so we're very familiar with setting the big strategy for an HR office and thinking about your workforce plan, thinking about your hiring plans. And so we aim to come alongside agencies and add that strategy to now the operational services that we're going to be providing, to figuring out how we can best use the technology, the new technology that we're bringing to government to, onboard individuals faster, get those personal actions processed at a increased volume, see noticeable reductions in time to hire. All the things that we've been asking for a lot of years, OPM seeks to be the leader now in these areas of services as we bring in the new technology and bring on these agencies.
All agencies on a single platform, potential to save $1 billion. These are all great things. My question would be, why hasn't this been thought of or action been taken to achieve this before? What makes now the right time for this approach and this change?
There's a tremendous amount of risk that happens when you change HR systems or any IT system, any of us who've been through any sort of modernization. And so you have to have a certain level of appetite for risk to take on such a tremendous change like this. And I think with the leadership that we have now at OPM and the vision that this administration has brought, are willing to take the risk and are willing to do big, bold things like put all of government on one core HCM system, because they are so driven by the efficiency and the cost savings and the improvements that it's going to bring to the federal government. I think that they've just demonstrated a capacity and willingness to do hard things because they believe in the greater good of what it's going to bring to the federal government.
So let's talk about the broader public. A lot of this modernization effort and things that are happening, we've been talking about governance structures, we've been talking about directives or memos, but clearly if this were to be implemented and it is successful, this will have a huge impact on service, benefit delivery, and the American public more broadly. Rebecca, you mentioned $1 billion in savings, but are there other tangible impacts that will be felt by the public through doing this work?
I think for the general public, they're going to see, I'm thinking about how they would interact with the agency missions as they interact with their HR providers. So we have a joke at OPM that we're the people that help the people that help the people, because we bring the HR policy guidance, oversight, and services to the agencies that in turn are the ones that have that direct line to the American public. What we will see is better hiring, individuals who are more equipped to come in and take on the roles. And I think that increases the service delivery to the American public. Learning management is a piece that we're offering with this core HCM buy. And I think we're going to get some economies of scale in learning management for the entire federal government that is going to raise the quality of learning opportunities that we have for our federal employees on even the most basic things like cybersecurity, harassment training, all those trainings that we have to take. Training and equipping the workforce is critically important to having a high-performing workforce. And so I believe that through being able to level set and raise learning management, they're going to see a better quality workforce for the federal government that's going to be delivering those services.
And Brodi, what might be your thoughts?
Just looking at the services that the shared services is going to be attempting to offer, I think the really interesting part will be kind of in the end state, who chooses to go kind of with the total suite versus who chooses to do kind of piece by piece. So for example, folks who may not have a chance to read all of the information, but the classic, a lot of it, operational stuff, payroll, leave, onboarding, performance management, things that every agency typically would have. But interestingly enough, they're also offering things like help on recruitment and retirement counseling and staff acquisition and human capital strategy. Things to be frank, in my mind, I would be, as a former Chico, a little hard to give up. Actually, pretty hard to give up because, I could see that as part of my identity. But if you can see, right, as a Chico or as a staffing manager, or as a hiring manager, real visibility into what other agencies are doing, right? We used to have a joke too. Everybody hires lawyers. Do you really need to have a totally unique hiring process for your lawyers? Or is there a better way to interact with the legal community so that, quote, lawyers can get into the government and be placed where they need to be? A lot of agencies hire economists as well. Same idea. Do you really need to have such boutique experiences each time you hire an economist, promote economists, place them? I don't think so. But the visibility into that kind of at that level, right, where you actually economists actually would be operating, I think could be very, very valuable if that cross-pollination happens. And I think that could be a really direct way the public could see it. I think having it be open so that folks know it's not just DOD lawyers or DOE lawyers or OPM lawyers, right? Maybe there are other commissions and everything like that we have in the government that they be more interested in, right? So we could actually open the aperture more, bringing people in, to really meet all the needs that the government has.
Brodi, you mentioned a lot of benefits, learning, economies of scale, improved collaboration. My last question to you, what advice do you have for agency leaders to help them advance towards this shared services model?
And this is going to be the hard part, I think, for Rebecca might need to hear. They have their own needs as well. Right? Each agency really will, and they will come with their own very specific issues. They have their own bosses, right? They have their own secretaries, they have their own commissioners who were charged, right, to come in and do important work. I used to say people are hiring us for the outcome, not the system or the explanation. And so a lot of times what the representatives are going to hear is, yeah, I understand we're doing all these great things, but I still need to hire this position at this time. And that is a tension that is always going to be there as you centralize or share services, right? That really helping that specificity and uniqueness with the economy of scale that OPM is going for. And so it's going to be an ongoing tension. And like I said earlier, I think the way you really address that is through change management. You really have clear communication constantly at multiple levels. You have ability to have customers have feedback, and then you constantly innovate and constantly communicate an innovation so that folks see the value proposition, know what they're paying for, and can move forward.
Rebecca, my last question to you, what's your advice to those agency leaders, but also give a sense of what we should be on the lookout for next? What might be upcoming milestones, pilots, or signals that shared services ecosystem is really maturing?
So while core HCM is mandatory, I think all but the intelligence agencies are going to be mandatory to come onto our system. Our shared services is totally voluntary. And what I want, Brodi, in response to what you were saying is let me and my team demonstrate the immense value that we can bring from OPM, who sits at the center of policy, technology, oversight, and services, and how we can provide the right level of service, the type of service that your agency needs. And in some cases, it may just be simply search support. You've got a number of PDs that need to be reclassified. You have a big hiring campaign that needs to happen. You need these cross-government actions. Like, I love that you brought up the attorneys, because we're doing cross-government hiring for attorneys because we know that that is a need. That you choose us based on value, or you may choose us to do the full suite of services because you've deemed it's more cost effective for you to use us as a shared service, depending on the size and mission of your agency, and that we can offer that value. So come to us, hold us accountable, let us demonstrate that value. In terms of what to look for next, we're all waiting for the announcement of what will be our new core HCM system. So I think that'll be a key milestone for folks to pay attention to. And we've already announced a handful of agencies who are coming on to use our shared services. We're constantly talking to more and more. I think you're going to hear additional agencies that are also opting in to use our shared services in terms of the operational. I just want to clarify, we've provided HR services to all 24 Act agencies and a number of independent and small agencies over the years. But in terms of that operational support, look for the announcements of where we have additional agencies coming on. And what I hope you see in the end is that you're seeing just better services coming out of OPM. You're seeing standardizing those high volume actions. You're seeing us be able to respond to a government-wide needs when there's surges or gaps in staffing, and that we're able to do it with speed while preserving merit and compliance.
As I mentioned earlier, in 2021, an Academy panel issued a report recommending that OPM seek funding from Congress to modernize its IT systems. It seems that OPM has done much more than that and has done it in a smart way. Really pleased to see that OPM has a clear plan, ambitious but transparent goals, leadership buy-in, and most importantly, is taking a collaborative approach. I want to thank Rebecca for sharing the latest update on what OPM is doing in this important work. And Brodi, thank you for giving us things to think about as we try to move forward more towards a shared services vision. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Management Matters is a presentation of the National Academy of Public Administration, produced by Lizzie Alwan and Matt Hampton, and edited by Matt Hampton.